I'm Lindsay France. This is Boom Bust broadcasting around the world from Washington, D.C. Coming up, we have a new media platform that is changing the way we consume media. I sit down with the head of content of Library to discuss the wave of the future. It's using blockchain technology. And we have updates on President Trump's trip to China. Guess what? North Korea and business concerns are taking over. We bring you the details. Also, my guest, conservative TV and radio commentator Steve Malzberg, breaks down the Senate and the House's version of tax reform. Stand by. Boom Bust starts right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard.
The turmoil has spilled over the border, but it's no surprise, is it? A mass arrest of government ministers, wealthy businessmen, and even members of the royal family in Saudi Arabia means the government is taking control of their assets. In June, all the way back in June, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman assumed the title of heir to the throne, and he's waited a bit, and now he's pushed forward drastic actions in what he calls a move to oust corruption and modernize the kingdom. Assets of those arrested amount to an estimated $800 billion. Most of it is not held within Saudi Arabia. Regulators in the United Arab Emirates have been ordered to dig out the accounts of at least 19 Saudis holding their money in the UAE banks. Possible prelude to freezing their accounts. Well, commercial bankers say they've got no explanation from the government, but they've got a pretty good idea why they've been given their marching orders. What went down is now coming up. It's oil prices, and it's record levels for U.S. oil exports on top of it, thanks in part to shale deposits in places like the Dakotas, producing more than ever, and supply cuts by major exporters. Brent crude was up 59 cents to $64.08 a barrel, not too far off from what we saw Tuesday at $64.65. It's the highest since June 2015. Increasing that spread is worry over the political upheaval in Saudi Arabia. According to the energy ministry there, in December, the kingdom plans to cut crude exports by 120,000 barrels per day. As a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, Saudi Arabia, as you might guess, has cut production as part of an effort to stem a global oil glut. It's had some limited success there. A meeting in November is expected to produce an extension of that deal past March 2018. But let's not forget what hits people most. In the United States, gas prices are up 34 cents from a year ago, averaging out now at about $2.54. On Thursday, President Trump wrapped up his two-day trip to China. But before jetting off to Vietnam and the Philippines, he addressed one topic that everyone was waiting for. Boom Bust Bianca Fascini has more on that for us.
Before and after his election, President Trump consistently criticized China for being a currency manipulator. He also pointed fingers at China for stealing jobs from U.S. workers through outsourcing. But during the second part of his tour in Beijing, he struck a very different tone.
It is a very one-sided and unfair one, but I don't blame China. After all, who can blame a country for being able to take advantage of another country for the benefit of its citizens? I give China great credit.
Trump added in his remarks that he blames his predecessors for the current trade deficit and the way it's impacted American workers. And Chinese President Xi also had some things to say about trade. Xi even said he wants to make it easier for American companies to do business in China.
Opening up to the outside world is a fundamental state policy of China. China will open its doors wider instead of closing it. We will push forward the setup of new patterns of opening under the strategy guidance decided by the 19th Party Congress. The investment and management environment for foreign enterprises, including those in the U.S., will be more open, more transparent, and more standardized.
After talking trade, both leaders touched on North Korea. Trump expressed his desire to liberate the region, and Xi said China would continue to enforce the United Nations Security Council resolutions. The press conference marked the end to Trump's China portion of his tour across Asia, which will finish up with stops in Vietnam and the Philippines. And while he's in Vietnam, he'll attend the annual Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, where leaders will discuss free trade throughout the region. This year's meeting is likely to include tougher talks and negotiations, with Trump's America First message disrupting global trade relations. By Friday, most leaders in attendance are anticipated to give speeches on what we can expect moving forward.
Interesting he brings up the 19th Party Congress, because a big thing with trade in China is intellectual property.
Yes.
Don't recall, open, transparent, but don't recall that party really dealing with that. But that's my own issue.
Yes.
Let's talk about APEC. Any mention of that?
From Trump, not yet, but we have seen some other leaders make comments on it because they've already arrived in Vietnam for the summit. And Filipino President Duterte gave us basically a pre-speech on APEC where he, jumped right into globalization and said that the U.S. was the first victim of globalization.
Called us a victim?
Called us a victim,
wow,
and said that it explains why Trump is now president. And then, of course, he got into some other topics about how globalization has impacted developing economies, and for them to really thrive, they need greater access to the global markets. So we'll see a lot of, a continuation of that throughout the summit on Thursday and Friday.
Okay, so lacking that colorful language we all like to listen to so much.
Yeah, so far. Don't speak too soon.
Yeah. What issues, though, are we expecting to hear about APEC?
Well, APEC is an annual summit about global trade. So we can expect lots of questions and comments about Trump's America First message, since that has been a pretty big trade disruptor. And as of Thursday, each of the other, so there were 12 nations originally involved in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Obviously, once the U.S. backed out, that left 11. And so far, the remaining 11 are committed to forging ahead with the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. That doesn't mean there might not be any changes, but so far they're making it clear that they don't really care that the U.S. is no longer a part of it, and that they're going to continue making deals with each other as the U.S. figures out how to move ahead alone, I guess.
Let me ask you, do you think Trump's going to badmouth it the whole way down the road, though?
Well, I think he's surprised a lot of people so far in China, saying that he doesn't blame China for treating the U.S. economy.
I like that
the way.
Yeah,
he doesn't blame China, and obviously, I mean, being in China is a little different than speaking in the United States. But I think we should expect to see him the same Trump, but a toned down version for sure.
That's what everybody says. We'll see. Thank you so much, Boom Bust, Bianca Ficini. How do we consume media content now? As we all know, it's digital, but let's crunch the numbers. According to TechCrunch, in 1 month, August 2017, Facebook scored 2 billion users. In that same time span, YouTube racked up a distant 1.5 billion. Instagram has 700 million. Twitter brings up the rear at 328 million. New platforms are cropping up all of the time. We see it again and again, but one is really disrupting. It's a flash word, but this time I mean it. Joining me now, Riley Smith, head of content for Library. Thank you for joining me on this.
Thanks
Explain the concept behind this media platform. How is it different?
So Library is a blockchain-based content platform.
Which already scares a lot of people hearing that.
It's pretty confusing, but it's actually really simple. And it enables you or anyone else who loves making content to publish it to the internet without being beholden to or feel full of corporate control or interests like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, and the threat that they represent today to people who make content.
So, as we all know, blockchain, most of us know anyway, blockchains is digital ledger. People opt in and then they sort of, I want to say, confirm a transaction. In this case, someone uploads media and they essentially confirm it, or as you told me before, they can flag it up for bad content, maybe, something like a suicide, which we talk about this on the show all the time. These media platforms are tasked with following this down. We're talking about crimes and things like that. How would you be able to weed that out? We're talking about ISIS videos and things like that.
Yeah, so the first thing to remember is that blockchain in this instance is just a tool or mechanism for having this experience and removing the middleman and making it easier for you to monetize your content and all that sort of thing.
And you have control over monetization, I'm
Yes,
assuming.
you as an individual publisher have complete control over how it's monetized, unlike how you would on YouTube. The flip side of that coin is obviously
freedom.
The ISIS videos and those things. Everyone has freedom, not just you, the creator, but the content that people don't think is very savory. But the reason it is a benefit in that area is because it also, because it's on a blockchain, causes those people who have that horrific content to be accountable. It's actually a worse place for them to publish stuff from an accountability or...
Right, but Facebook and its kind have to play catch up. Wouldn't library have to play that sort of catch up, or would the community sound off and take action in an easier way? Because no one wants to see people selling missile launchers or ISIS videos along with a legitimate newscast, right? I mean, that's you're gonna have some kickback on that. So what's the response time?
So the response, I think, is arguably much faster than it would be on a YouTube or a Facebook. So Facebook or YouTube, you are reliant on them, someone making a report, and then they basically have to play whack-a-mole for what it...
And hire 10,000 people to do it.
Yeah, and the overhead for combating that problem is really strong, whereas in an instance of library, it's faster, it's community-driven, and if something is flagged, then the response will be faster, which also includes things that maybe shouldn't be demonetized that are good, so you're not beholden to where YouTube doesn't like what they publish.
No safe spaces?
Today.
Are you saying no safe spaces?
There's no safe spaces.
Awesome. Excellent. We love that on this show.
That's your kind of platform.
What kind of interest have you gotten in this? Because obviously it's kind of going against a tide. Right now you can Google anything and your YouTube video pops up or something like that. It's something people have to opt into. A lot of curiosity. What are people asking you about this?
I think the biggest consideration is people haven't been used to having this level of agency or control that they should be entitled to.
It's a word, right? The Bitcoin.
It's a big buzzword,
paradigm.
but in this instance, it has a very practical use, which
Yeah.
is it just enables you to be less censored, basically, and it's the further of a trend, which is becoming freer, allowing information to flow more freely than it has in the past, which is library is just another evolution of that, I'd say.
Okay, you think they're going to blow the industry up? You have to say that because you're on TV, but do you think it's really gonna disrupt? Do you see other people sort of following suit, stealing your ideas?
I think in the
it's
future,
really unique right now.
Yeah, and maybe not today, but in the future, it is inevitable that this technology will be a vehicle for you or anyone else to publish content easily.
Right.
It's the lower friction. It's a no-brainer.
Wave of the future, as you say. Gotta ask real quick. You are pushing a Buick up a hill because you're starting something new. It's breaking barriers. How tough is this to explain it and win people over? Maybe it's easy.
It's really just our job to make it as easy as possible, because at the end of the day, the blockchain and all that confusing stuff shouldn't be your responsibility to understand. The application should be easy for you and everyone else who wants to use it. So the blockchain stuff is a means to an end. It's not the most important thing here, even though it is a valuable feature.
And of course, people get their freedom and their safety all in one, and hopefully it opens up discussions.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to keep an eye on this.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Riley Smith, Head of Content for Library.
Thank you.
We're going to go to break now, but stick around, because when we get back, sexual harassment may be tax deductible for corporations. Watching the Hawks host Tabitha Wallace joins me to sound off. And we've got competing versions of tax reform on Capitol Hill. We pull the two sides apart, figure the problem out. As we go to break, here are the numbers at the closing bell.
I think the average viewer, just after watching a couple of segments, understands that we're telling stories that our critics can't tell. And you know why? Because their advertisers won't let them. In order to create change, you have to be honest. You have to tell the truth. RT's able to do that. Every story is built on going after the backstory to what's really happening out there to the American public. What's happening when a corporation makes a pharmaceutical that kills people? When a company in the environmental business ends up polluting a river that causes cancer and other illnesses, they put all the health risk, all the dangers out to the American public. Those are stories that we tell every week, and you know what? They're working.
For decades, the American middle class has been railroaded by Washington politics. Big money corporate interest has drowned out a lot of voices. That's how it is in the news culture in this country now. That's where I come in. I'm Ed Schultz. I do the news on RT America. I'll make sure you don't get railroaded and you'll get the straight talk and the straight news. Question more.
Bitcoin skyrocketed in value early Thursday, hitting just shy of $8,000. Since it has declined back to around $7,100 now, it has split 2 times, though, this year. Now the fight is on to prevent it from doing so again. And some of the biggest names in Bitcoin in that world have signed on to keep it from splitting by preventing an upgrade that would have increased the network's capacity. And 2 versions of the tax bill, one from the Senate, one from the House. We have both now. The fight is on to resolve the differences, but can they? Joining me now, conservative TV and radio host Steve Malzberg. Great to have you on here. Our resident tax expert. Standout differences to you. There is some broad overlap, but there's some places where there's some friction.
Well, let's start on the corporate side.
Right.
The Senate wants to delay the implementation of the reduction of the corporate rate from 35 to 20 for a year. It will go into effect January 1st, 2019. Donald Trump doesn't like that, although Paul Ryan yesterday indicated he may be open to that. It saves $100 billion over 10 years, and they need to come down because they're a bit over, especially in the House. There's also the good thing for corporations is that they can still deduct capital investments 100% immediately in 2018, and they believe that is what corporations are looking for even more than the tax deduction. So we'll see how that plays out. That's the corporate side, and then you got a whole bunch of differences on the individual side.
Well, we've got, at issue here are mortgage deductions, the SALT tax. Donald Trump has said from day one, if there is any hint that taxes could go up for the middle class, it's a non-starter. How is this conversation going to proceed? He's going to get back from Asia and he's going to go gangbusters on this thing. We both know this.
Well, I think what he's going to buy into is what they're telling us, and that is that when the corporate tax breaks are going to trickle down, again, I hate that term, but trickle down to the individuals, to families. Paul Ryan already said that because of what they're doing for the corporations, each family of 4, the average family of 4, will get benefit $4,000 worth. And the individual tax breaks, the doubling of the standard deductions, et cetera, will give the average family of 4 $1,200 in tax breaks. So I think Donald Trump's going to buy into that. You're going to have in the Senate bill just some more differences, 7 tax brackets as opposed to the 3 offered by the House. And the top bracket in the Senate is 38.5 instead of 39.6, and then a 6% penalty on anything over $1 million. So there are so many differences. The Senate keeps the mortgage deduction at $1 million. It keeps the adoption deduction. It keeps the health care deduction. This is going to be an ongoing process within the Senate, within the House, and then they got to come together and reconcile everything.
I've got to break down this graph. We've got just anecdotally here, it's insane to me because the Republicans have been selling the American people on simplify, 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 and then we go from 4 to 7. Is there going to be pushback on that? 38.5 is very high. 7? I mean, this seems like the status quo, and people are going to be angry about that if I'm misjudging the situation.
Well, you're going to need a postcard that's about 16 times the size of this. It's not going to be a postcard with 7 brackets, and I don't understand the logic there. It seems like making it more complicated than it is, as you said. But look, again, when push comes to shove, I think they're going to come to agreement. By the way, the Obamacare individual mandate is not addressed in the Senate bill or in the House bill, and that would be a savings. But they don't think they could get that through the Senate with people like Susan Collins and Senator Murkowski. So they got to stay away from that. Otherwise, if they lose more than 2 in the Senate, they could be done unless a Democrat or 2 are picked off. This is the most complicated, convoluted process you could imagine, and they want to get it done like tomorrow.
Right. Let's talk about that deadline, though. They're saying before the holidays, before Thanksgiving. Looking at the fine print here, you don't even have to look at the fine print. Let's just look at the large print. You think they can actually get this done?
I think they'll get something done. I got to tell you, I know there are Republicans who are not going to vote for it in the House because of the SALT. I mean, if the Senate version stands, the property tax deduction that the House said, okay, you could keep in the state and local taxes, that goes away. You can't deduct anything. And the congressman from New York and New Jersey will not vote for it, although California, who will also get hit hard, they're willing to vote for it, which I don't understand that, to be honest with you. But yes, I think they are going to pass a tax bill. Whether it will be good or bad or ugly, I don't know, but they will come together, and before Christmas or on Christmas or Christmas Eve, Donald Trump will sign it.
Okay, it's either going to be a postcard or the size of a legal pad, but we'll have something. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Conservative TV and radio host Steve Malzberg. Money in exchange for cash settlements with victims of sexual harassment and, in some cases, sexual assault. It's not a new mechanism for corporations to shut up the victims of crimes perpetrated by their top stars and executives. But did you know the payouts can be tax deductible? Here to weigh in is co-host of Watching the Hawks, Tabitha Wallace. Okay, you've talked about this on your show. This is insanity. Right. Tax exemption for the payor, a tax it for the payee. Explain this.
So the first thing that's most disturbing is that corporations can, if their CEO or one of their employees is charged with this, or it comes up as an accusation, they call them out.
Right.
Instead of going to court, instead of doing all this arbitration, there are often payouts and non-disclosure agreements, which is fine. Everybody's on board with that. The thing is, those payouts, which are essentially for your CEO or your executive or your star's bad behavior, are tax deductible as a standard cost of doing business, according to the tax code.
And it wasn't always that way. This law changed.
It changed. There used to be a situation where half a century ago, businesses couldn't use tax deductions for anything deemed a violation of public policy. But it's technically not illegal to pay someone because of your bad or illegal behavior. Because they're not really admitting
a crime.
Right. And if you turn it around, the worst part is that the victim, the person getting the cash payout, does have to pay taxes on it. And if you go to court and get a payout, even if you win in a lawsuit, you still have to pay taxes. The victim pays the taxes on all of it, including her legal fees. Then they make more taxes when the lawyer gets it as income. So they're triple dipping on the victim side, and everybody on the other side just writes it off as a business expense.
Well, I can see taxing the lawyer because it's for service rendered. It's for work. This person didn't work for it. It wasn't necessarily earned income. It wasn't an investment. There was no work done.
Right.
They were literally settling for this. Do you think that stories like this coming out, and not only touching women, but now in the mainstream, touching men who didn't have the courage to come out, do you think this is going to get more play, that people will work to change this?
Absolutely, because it's not just in the sexual assault. What we were learning in the Weinstein case, and full disclosure, I used to work at the Weinstein Company, is that, so my inside information on that is that there were a lot of physical assaults of men, not sexual, but there was a lot of abuse in the workplace and toxic work environments, that this is going to start coming up. The movement to tackle this problem is big, and it's starting to gain ground, and I think companies have to be aware that it's going to cost you more in the long run to try to cover this stuff up. There was actually a professor at Wayne State University who said there's no surefire way to end sexual harassment and assault in the workplace, but making it cost more to hide this misconduct can make it less commonplace. And I think corporations need to look at that.
Something that occurred to me when I read this story was perhaps you know, this does incentivize a company to settle with someone, because a lot of companies, I don't care if it's a car company or a computer company or entertainment, they'll keep a stash of cash to worry about lawsuits of any kind, any payouts needed. Do you think this would incentivize those companies to hand over that cash if then the government essentially pays for it? So that's what's giving them...
Sure, it's much easier in the long run for a corporation to just write a check and give them a non-disclosure agreement and everybody walks away. I mean, what you're finding is that ultimately, if corporations simply followed basic protocol and procedure and were just better about sort of nipping this stuff in the bud when it starts to be a problem, they wouldn't have to have bags of cash waiting to pay it.
Exactly.
And ultimately, like in the Weinstein situation, I think you're going to see more lawsuits. And at the end of the day, the Weinstein Company and people who are related to that could end up paying a lot of money, and investors. And movie stars on sets, production companies, and then on Wall Street. We're seeing it there too now, and in politicians.
Of course, well, it's always been there and all of it. Finally, people are coming out. I mean, yeah, we're seeing it.
Right.
Do you think that this will turn the tide of, you know, people saying, I'm not going to settle, I'm going to take you to court because it's justice, because you report one person and then you find a string of 30 years. Do you think there will be an avoidance of settlements now and instead taking people to court and grabbing money that way?
I think it is, because now what you're seeing is...
It's like an anger you're seeing in society.
And I think the fact that law enforcement and police departments are finally starting to really prosecute or investigate these crimes, even ones that happened years before, at any point if they involve a workplace especially, they're looking into them now. And if those start to go to court and people get prosecuted, corporations aren't going to want to... And at the end of the day, they're stockholders. Do your stockholders know that you're using money to pay off bad behavior? I think you could have a lot of people wondering what profits really look like.
Right.
If you're paying $32 million to somebody to cover up bad behavior.
Then you know there's a string. It's not a one-off.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tabitha Wallace, co-host of Watching the Hawks.
Thank you.
Shifting gears, if you're a fan of something, you don't generally like it when someone tries to make changes to that, whether it's your favorite character on TV or, in this case, Nutella. A consumer protection group noticed a slightly lighter color of the delicious hazelnut spread, and that the amount of milk powder had been increased. Because cocoa was now lower on the list of ingredients, they concluded then that the company had to have cut back the amount of cocoa in the spread in order to add more milk powder. It's an honest deduction there. This isn't the only time candy lovers have felt betrayed by the brands they love. Just last year, Toblerone fans had their own scandal when they found out that the distance between each chocolatey triangle had increased seemingly overnight. Way to cut costs. Very smart. Thanks for watching. Be sure to catch Boom Bust on DirecTV. In the United States, you can find us on the RT channel 321. And if you miss us on DirecTV, catch Boom Bust on YouTube. YouTube.com/BoomBustRT. Thanks for watching. See you next time.